The following 10 actors all plumb the critical depths this past year, starring in what's categorically their worst major movie project to date, as evidenced by their brutal reviews and perhaps also their catastrophic box office results. And yet, Hollywood sure does love a rebound, doesn't it? So hopefully these actors will be back on top before we know it. I'm Gareth, this is What Culture, and here are 10 actors who just starred in their worst movie ever. Number 10, Cate Blanchett, Borderlands. Cate Blanchett has one of the most enviable filmographies of any actor working today. In addition to her 8 Oscar nominations and 2 wins, she's got no outright duds to her name. And even her least regarded films have generally received mixed reviews at worst. That was at least until Borderlands. Borderlands. Many fans of the hit video game franchise raised their eyebrows when Blanchett was cast as the big screen adaptation's version of Lilith, given that Blanchett is considerably older than the game version of the character, and simply seemed like an odd fit on paper. And by her own admission, Blanchett primarily accepted the role to get out of her lockdown funk in a particularly nasty period of the pandemic, rather than because she naturally gravitated towards the material. And while the actress brings a certain cocksure moxie to the role, there's nothing she can do to fix Borderlands' fundamental flaws. From its scrawled-on-a-napkin script to its lackluster action sequences and overall stapled-together feel, this is a dud that a performer as talented as Blanchett should have sniffed out a mile away. And again, lockdown brain, it was definitely a thing. Number 9, Sylvester Stallone, Armor. Sylvester Stallone finally did it, the bloody madman. He finally starred in a movie worse than Stop or My Mum Will Shoot. So yeah, go him. Though, admittedly, we are using the term starred in rather generously here. Stallone's latest direct-to-VOD slot-bucket action flick, Armor, is one of the laziest geezer teasers of recent years. A film whose sole existence was reliant on Sly's willingness to show up for a day's worth of filming, so his face could be legally plastered over all the marketing. And we're not even joking, people. Stallone indeed spent a single day working on this embarrassingly low-rent actioner, for which he was reportedly paid a stonking $3.5 million. Must be nice. But even with such a hefty payday, Sly seems bored and annoyed throughout his 15 or so minutes of screen time, ensuring anyone drawn to the movie by his presence was likely left hugely disappointed. Armor ended up landing an almost impressive 0% on the tomato meter, a fitting score for what's the single lousiest entry in Stallone's wildly uneven filmography. Now look, Armor may not be that good, but Stallone has definitely had some great films over the years, so I want to know right now in the comment section down below, what is your favourite Sylvester Stallone film of all time? Number 8, Bill Skarsgard, The Crow. The recent new take on The Crow was released to basically anti-hype, and so it was little surprise when the Bill Skarsgard starring redo was summarily panned by most critics. But The Crow 2024 wasn't merely a rancid retelling of a cult classic and one that flopped at the box office. It's also the worst thing that Skarsgard has been the name and face of. Now, to be fair, the actor did appear in the even worse received Divergent sequel, Allegiant, which rocks a pitiful 11% compared to The Crow's 22%. But given that Skarsgard's role in the former is a long-forgotten supporting one, The Crow is the front-and-center career dud that's more likely to be remembered. Though Skarsgard tries to make it work, the excessively slick filmmaking lacks the gothic grit of the original, and overall just feels like it's trying way too hard to John Wickify the IP, something that nobody who enjoyed the 1994 film was really asking for. Number 7, Sofia Boutella, Rebel Moon Part 2, The Scargiver. Sadly, Sofia Boutella has been wasted in her fair share of movies, but never more than in the concluding chapter of Zack Snyder's disastrous Rebel Moon duology. Though Boutella got a little more time to shine in last year's opening entry, Part 2, The Scargiver often makes her feel like an also-ran background character in her own movie. it's just really baffling. Couple this with the agonizingly dull writing and exhaustingly monotonous CGI-powered action sequences, and the Scargiver feels like the movie equivalent of watching someone else play a video game that you'd much rather get your hands on yourself. Again, Boutella has a number of dud projects to her name, but even something as wretched as 2017's The Mummy reboot at least allowed the actress to demonstrate some vicious screen presence as the titular villain. Here, though, she is a total nothing burger of a character in a movie that was near instantly forgotten by most the moment the end credits rolled. Number 6, Adam Driver, Megalopolis. Now, while last year's sci-fi action romp 65 technically has lower critical reviews than Megalopolis, on the balance of both critical and audience scores, Francis Ford Coppola's long-awaited opus fares worse. It's easy to see why Adam Driver signed up to star in what will probably be Coppola's final ever film, and he was likely aware that Megalopolis wouldn't end up ranking among the auteur's finest ever works. All the same, Megalopolis is an ambitious failure with a heavy emphasis on failure. Gaudy, technically sloppy, unintentionally hilarious, and often wildly boring all at once. Hell of a combination. Though Driver has precious few misses in his filmography, this is certainly the most crushing of the lot, even more so than Star Wars Episode 9 The Rise of Skywalker. While that film was a soulless, rush-to-market blockbuster, Megalopolis is a depressingly yawn-inducing offering from one of the industry's all-time greats, and one that dared tease a strangely off-key performance out of Driver himself, who evidently just took the material much too seriously. If you're enjoying this What Culture list today, my friend, then hit that subscribe button and guess what? You'll get even more, so do it. Number 5, Chris Pine, Poolman. Chris Pine is an especially interesting entry onto this list, because in the case of his new dramedy misfire Poolman, he's also the co-writer and director. He was wearing all the hats. Poolman was rinsed by critics at its TIFF premiere last year, and hardly received much more love when it was screened by mainstream critics and general audiences earlier this year. Though clearly designed as Pine's love letter to both Chinatown and The Big Lebowski, this nebulous comedy noir goes around in circles for most of its 100 minutes, and its attempts at quirky, oddball charm mostly come off as obnoxious and insufferable. And it's a genuine surprise coming from Pine, a typically likable actor who many wanted to succeed in his first time up to bat as a filmmaker. But this was not it. Not even close. Though Pine's 2006 rom-com Just My Luck has a lower tomato meter score on paper, 15% compared to Poolman's 24%, it also has almost double the reviews of Poolman, which had such a noxious reception from its premiere that it couldn't entice most critics to even bother watching it. Needless to say, if another 50 or 60 critics dared to review Poolman, its score would likely sink even lower. Yes, that was a water joke, let's move on. Number 4, Katherine Waterston, Afraid. Katherine Waterston is a terrifically talented actress with a ton of great movies to her name. Though in 2024, she appeared in her first project to score near universal critical scorn. We're talking, of course, about the new Blumhouse flick, Afraid, a shockingly inept tech horror romp from the usually reliable Chris Weitz, co-director and co-writer of About a Boy. Starring Waterston and John Cho as parents who find themselves facing off against an experimental smart home AI. In an era where concerns about AI are understandably at an all-time high, it's certainly a premise with plenty of promise. And yet, White's script offers up only the most basic, surface-level assessment of the current AI conundrum. And above all else, it's neither scary nor fun. It's also painfully clear the film was put through the post-production mangle, with a scant 84-minute runtime which ensures that neither Waterston nor Cho get much of a chance to flex their sizable acting chops. What a damn waste. Number 3, Zachary Levi, Harold and the Purple Crayon. A few short years ago, it seemed like Shazam might propel Zachary Levi into the A-list, and apparently Levi himself thought so too. But 5 years and one flop Shazam sequel later, Levi is now shilling for Donald Trump and slightly less embarrassingly starring in pan-turkeys like Harold and the Purple Crayon, impressively one-upping his role in last year's rancid Spy Kids Armageddon. Levi's latest family comedy was pummeled by critics for deviating too far from the source material. And worst of all, simply being a dull slog of a movie. Now sure, Big Mama's House 2 has worse reviews, but A, Levi wasn't the star of that, and B, it's a lot less snoozily bland than this dreck. Number 2, Aaron Taylor Johnson, Kraven the Hunter. Sandwiched between the acclaimed likes of The Fall Guy and Nosferatu, Aaron Taylor Johnson just starred in the biggest dud of his career with Kraven the Hunter. Near universally panned by critics and indifferently received by general audiences, Kraven is a disappointment not only for Taylor Johnson's involvement, but that of director J.C. Chandor, who directed All Is Lost and A Most Violent Year, as well as the film's more adult-skewing R rating. But neither actor nor director can salvage a woefully clunky script packed with generic superhero movie beats and risible dialogue, ensuring that while this isn't quite as awful as the recent Madam Web, it's another surefire misfire for Sony's non-starter of a Spider-Man universe. The weirdest cinematic universe ever? Yep, maybe. Now, Taylor Johnson's career has had its failings before, but never one on a scale this spectacular. And to make matters worse, the $130 million tentpole flopped at the box office. Needless to say, it's not a good look for the actor if those rumours about him being a top choice for James Bond are indeed true. And number 1, Kerry Condon, Night Swim. It's not uncommon for Oscar-nominated actors to follow up their awards nod by starring in some low-rent tat for an easy, beefed-up paycheck. And that's evidently the case with Kerry Condon in Blumhouse's risible Night Swim. Condon's critical batting average is otherwise very respectable, with her worst reviewed film prior to Night Swim being 2018's dramatic thriller Bad Samaritan, which sits at a not awful 54% over at Rotten Tomatoes. But Night Swim was largely panned by critics, who slammed it for failing to have any fun at all with its patently ridiculous premise of a haunted swimming pool that terrorizes its new owners. How can you not have fun with that? Condon and co-star Wyatt Russell certainly try to elevate the material, but what's to be done with a script that's so humorless and generic? Ultimately, they're powerless to do anything but act around in circles and collect their salary at the end. Given Condon's rock-solid career track record to date and tendency to avoid junky horror flicks like this though, this train wreck's clearly not going to do her career any harm, thankfully. Everyone will likely just forget about this dip and move on. And you know what I think you should do? You should move on to another What Culture video right here. Go and click on it and have a good time.